Good morning. Another wonderful day in the neighborhood. You know, the wall's getting better. Have y'all noticed over there? We could make that wall a lot smaller if it had bills worth having, but that's okay. I thought that was kind of funny. Never mind. Y'all bow with me. Heavenly Father, we just say thank you for the blessings that you give, for all the wonderful things that life provides. Thank you for being there for us when things go a little bit south. Let us realize and know that through you we're safe and protected, and you will take care of us. Lead, guide, and direct us. Let us do things that please you. And again, I ask you to forgive us when we don't. Be with us. Keep your hand on us. Let us have a wonderful day. Ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, here's the deal. Y'all got to be quick. Don't make me do the bell. And so everybody knows, Chairman first. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This will be very quick. On first page, third item down, House Resolution under Open Rules 898. This is the third part of the Chief Turnaround Officer bill we passed last year. This is looking at accreditation in the state, a study committee to look at accreditation with SACS and what we need to do.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Hitchens.
This is House Resolution 1076 under Open Rule next to the last in the middle section. What this is a House resolution asking our federal partners to come forth with funding for the Georgia ports and the harbor deepening. As you know, I represent the ports, and the price originally started out in 2014 in $706 million. Because the federal government hadn't contributed their fair share, we're now up to $973 million. We lose $283 million a year in economic benefit when it's not completed. If they don't pony up about $100 million a year instead of the $45 million that they are, could go on for as much as 5 extra years, which would cost us $1 billion.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Werkheiser.
Thank you, Chairman. On the second page, 6-1 down, House Bill 767. This is a request from the Commissioner of Labor. It will allow folks to apply online for workers' comp as they're closing offices. Constituents are having to travel further and further, and so it would help both rural and actually those in the city too. So it's time for questions.
I'll ask. Are there any questions?
So noted.
Wait a second. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, to the author of the bill, you just mentioned, you said workers' comp. You meant unemployment insurance.
I stand corrected.
Glad somebody was listening. No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If you'll turn to page 2, the second section, right in the middle, House Bill 697. This is to extend for 1 year the tax exemption for our very important nonprofit clinics that serve our medically underserved. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes, there's questions, but you can't handle them. Go. You're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ridley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you House Bill 690. This is a bill from last year whenever we did the leasing program. It is on page 2, about the 5th one down, under the structured rules. The only thing I'm doing on this is on line 12, we're adding or used. Last year we left that out.
No questions, thank you. Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you HB 759. It's listed as the second bill on the front page under the open rule. This is a bill that would allow for a child who qualifies for the special needs scholarship to maintain that eligibility even if they were to go into something that they wouldn't actually earn the money for in the first year. It would prevent them from having to go back for a second year at a traditional public school and go try something else.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 381, the second one down on modified open rule on the front page. Basically what this bill does, it provides a landowner with the ability to request the county or city to inspect an abandoned mobile home to determine if it's either derelict or intact. It provides them a procedure to go through where they can, if it's derelict, be able to have the mobile home to dispose of, or if it's deemed intact, there's procedures where they can have a lien and go through a foreclosure procedure to have it removed. And that's all this bill does, Mr. Chairman.
No questions, thank you. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee. My bill is HB 672 under modified open rule. It's the eighth one down. And this bill is entitled Edna Law. We want to be our school police officers to be able to use radar. In 2015, we had 11,000 injuries in Georgia and 373 fatalities in the school zone. And this is to help move forward and help our children to be safe.
No questions, thank you. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second page, modified structure rule, HB 800. It's the second to the last item. This bill eliminates the offices of Director Emeritus, Administrative Law Judge Emeritus off those State Board of Workers' Compensation.
No questions, thank you. Mr. Gravely.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Chairman. On the very last page under Structured, House Bill 816, this is a department bill, a request from Revenue Commissioner Ms. Lynn Riley in order for the department to be in compliance with the new IRS regulations. She is requesting that she have the capability of doing fingerprinting and background checks for those employees and subcontractor employees that will be handling sensitive tax information and return information.
Any questions? No questions. You got another one?
Yes, sir, I do. The same exact bill for the Department of Labor. It is on the back of the first page, House Bill 795. It's the same request from Commissioner Mark Butler.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the illustrious Rules Committee. I bring to you today House Bill 704. It is in the second section on the first page, just near the third hole punch on your front page there. It is currently illegal for contractors to bury garbage on a lot after they build your house, but there is an 8-year statute of repose governing that, which means if it takes on average 20 years for garbage to decompose enough to find, you are now 12 years after the ability to hold them accountable for it. So this would extend that to as soon as it is discovered or should have been discoverable, so that you can always hold them accountable for having illegally buried garbage on your yard.
We got questions. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell, you said there's a statute of repose in the bill?
There's a current statute of repose in the code that governs all deficiencies with contractor work, and that governs garbage buried. So what this would do is then extend that. It's a carve-out that matches the current carve-out we have for exterior siding that would extend it out to as soon as it's discovered.
So your bill creates statute of limitations of 2 years from the date of discovery, from the date that the plaintiff knew or should have known.
Yes, sir.
But there is still an 8-year statute of repose.
That governs all contractor deficiencies. What this would do is effectively allow a loophole for the homeowner to hold that contractor accountable as soon as it's discovered. Does that make sense? Qualifier is that I'm not an attorney.
Well, no, maybe we can talk offline, but my concern is that if you're, I'm not sure if you're trying to create an exception to the statute of repose, and if that's the case, then that would be the concern I'd have. So let's just talk about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Any other questions? No more, thank you. Mr. Teasley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fourth one down on structured rule, House Bill 664, which would increase the tax deduction for contributing to a child's 529 savings plan from $2,000 and $4,000 to $4,000 and $8,000 if married filing jointly.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kendrick.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am presenting House Resolution 940, which is the last one under open rule on the first page. And this is an urging resolution encouraging the state of Georgia to host the world's largest startup pitch competition.
No questions, thank you. Ms. Hanson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring the first bill under modified open rule, House Bill 190. It is codifying that prenuptial agreements would need to be in writing and attested to by 2 witnesses, one of which would be a notary public.
No questions, thank you. Ms. Bentley.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 735, which is found on page 2 under structure rule. 735 is an income tax credit expenditures on the maintenance of a railroad track owned or leased by a Class 3 railroad company. And House Bill 735 is a recommendation of the Rural Advisory Council. Are there any questions at this time? I'll be happy to.
I have one. In that bill, it's got the word transferability. Is that word necessary for this bill?
Yes, sir, but if we need to look at it deeper, we certainly can.
I want you to look real close at that word.
Yes, sir, I will.
No more questions, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Ms. Silcox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you again House Bill 636, which would create a board for licensure of the genetic counselors. It's under modified open on the first page.
Any questions? No questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Blackman.
Sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring before you House Bill 327 on page 2. It's second down under structured. This is many of the TAVT provisions from House Bill 340, which passed this body last year. A couple of changes worth noting. The effective rate would actually go down from 7% to 6.75, and the leasing provision passed as part of House Bill 340 last year.
Mr. Stevens.
Isn't it true that if this bill passes, that we'll go home and tell our consumers that they're paying a lower fee for tax?
On all motor vehicle purchases, yes, sir.
Mr. Blackman, was there any consideration given, I noticed there starting in 2019, the split?
The redistribution, yes, sir.
Was there any consideration of starting 2019 on what the split is today? Starting.
Oh, starting sooner?
Yeah.
There was, I mean, we would have started sooner had it passed last year, of course, but the department requests us a start date of no later than July 1 of 2019 to satisfy some of their software requirements.
Is it true that in today's market and today's budget that the local governments get some $700 million off of this under what is about a 60-40 split, with the state getting 1.3 billion?
It does shift some dollars back to local governments. The original split back in 2012 was somewhere in the neighborhood of $535 million for the state and about $1.2 billion for locals. And the shift has trended more towards a 50-50 split. And so this reestablishes kind of the distribution that we had back in 2012. And it does it over the period of about 7 years. So it does graduate it out, but very similar to the provision included in last year's bill.
Is it not true that in 2019 the 80-20 split will severely cut the amount the locals get?
Well, they're actually guaranteed $800 million up front, so they get that before the 80-20 split.
No more questions.
May I ask for another, Mr. Chairman?
You sure can.
I have House Bill 749, which is 3 up from the bottom under the same structured rule category, and that is retirement exemption for families of deceased veterans.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Put it on there. Ms. Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask for House Bill 738, which is the first bill at the top of the list under open rule. This makes a small adjustment to probate court procedures, defining an interested person in a more expanded way who may probate a will.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Members of the committee, bring to you again House Bill 657, modified structured, top of the second page. This bill, again, is a bill that would criminalize straw purchases, the act of knowingly and intentionally providing firearms to felons. And I would just add, Mr. Chairman, this is supported by pro-gun groups who understand that it is a small minority of people that commit gun crimes. And this bill doesn't encumber in any way law-abiding gun owners.
Isn't it already a felony to supply a gun to a felon?
No, sir.
Mr. Coomer.
Ms. Petrie, I think maybe the background for the chairman's question is that under current law in Georgia, if you assist a person in committing a felony or you are part of a a series of actions to help that person commit a felony, then as a co-conspirator, you would also be guilty of that underlying felony. Or if you attempt to do that, you'd be charged with attempt to commit that felony. So isn't it true then that if you try to help a felon get a firearm and you know that it's illegal for them to obtain it, then wouldn't you be guilty as a co-conspirator or in an attempt to commit that act with them?
Yes, Mr. Whip, that is, our prosecuting attorneys tell me they can't prosecute that. That is, and they testified in committee to the same issue. The bottom line is the law as it is written essentially does not allow us to do anything to hold people accountable for providing weapons to known felons. There is a statute on the books expressly like this, not worded quite the same, but it is a misdemeanor. But to go the route you just described, essentially the DAs say they can't enforce it, and it has, they've been ineffective at using that as a deterrent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the second page, House Bill 789 under modified structured. Mr. Chairman, what this bill does is codifies our case law, which defines what an independent contractor is in the state of Georgia as it would apply to a online web-based company.
If you've got questions on his bill, raise your hand. Okay, no questions.
Thank
Mr. Kirk, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second page, next to the last bill on structured rule, from the bottom next to the last, HB 792. All we're doing is taking and extending the sunset for 1 year on the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund.
Any questions? I'm going to go with Mr. J. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on that 1 year extension, which started out as a 5-year extension, I would ask for House Resolution 158. It's the last one under structured rule. It's a constitutional amendment, which would statutorily allow this legislature to dedicate fees for a particular purpose.
Any questions of Mr. Powell? Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask for House Bill 670 in the spirit of Mr. Fleming's amendment yesterday to another bill. This deals with the Juvenile Interstate Compact. Currently, it allows for one legislative representative to be appointed by the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor, so they have to rub heads together to figure out who they want on there. And what this does, this puts one from each house, so the Speaker can appoint a House member, and the Senate can appoint a Lieutenant Governor can appoint a Senate member to this Juvenile Interstate Compact.
Any questions? I thought it was a frog. I don't know. Spring is here. Ms. Cooper?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for House Bill 635. It's under modified structure on the front page, second from the bottom, but there is a substitute on everyone's desk. This would travel as a floor substitute. There was some mix-up on LC numbers, and the amendments that were put on it in the committee got on the wrong LC, so that's the reason for the substitute on the desk. This would allow district attorneys across our state to set up working groups of the people that are involved in dealing with elder abuse or disabled abuse cases, hopefully proactively when are not just fatalities, and share information among this working group, keeping everything confidential. And we're talking about the DA and the police and APS workers from the state and the GBI, that group of people, to try to ward off some of our elder abuse that's going on, which is rampant. Thank you.
Let's take care of that LC. Mr. Earhart.
Travel as a rule substitute or a rules amendment if it's a modified structure under 33-2.
I can't use your thing. I can't hear you.
Would it not have to travel as either a rule substitute out of here or an amendment to the modified structure if it?
The House rules state that it would be treated the same as an amendment.
It's a rule substitute then. Okay.
So.
Not a floor sub.
What we're asking for is that the Rules Committee approve the floor substitute of LC 372563S. It is not a rules amendment. We are approving the floor substitute. I've got Mr. Earhart shaking his head like this. So that's what I'm asking for. We have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Y'all know I get spanked and put in line by a couple of folks in here. Earhart's one of them. And the dean's the other one. Why do we let them spank me? They've sat up here and had to put up with this abuse a lot longer than I have. Okay, so that's on HB 635. That LC number will be the floor substitute that the Rules Committee has approved. Mr. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also ask for House Bill 190, which is a bill that Representative Hansen spoke to. This is something that we've had for a couple of years, but it's an area of the law that requires, I think, some structure by statute. We do not currently have statutory provisions that address how and under what circumstances these agreements can be made and enforced, and I would urge the committee to approve that bill.
Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I also want to ask for House Bill 749 for our military families of these deceased veterans, incredibly well vetted through the Ways and Means Committee, and I would ask for support for our district down in Hinesville.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First page, under modified open rule, third down, House Bill 418 would allow teachers who are members of the Georgia Teacher Retirement System, if they go overseas to teach in an accredited American school, they can request to buy 2 years of that service if they teach for more than 2 years over there. There is no cost to the system. They have to pay the full actuarial cost of what they buy back.
Any questions? Mr. Martin, question.
Isn't it true this is a similar situation we've had in the past, that when they buy it back immediately at that point in time, there's no cost to the system, but the minute after that, there is in fact cost to the system, and that with our discount rate being 7.5% and all actuaries across the country saying that's too high, that immediately when they buy that service back, it costs the taxpayers, and yet when they're teaching internationally, our students aren't gaining any benefit from that?
are you just throwing something out there, or do you have statistics to back that up?
I have a book of statistics, and I have a book from the TRS system that backs that up.
Well, all I've got to go by is what the actuarial study throws out there and says that.
And again, with due respect, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to debate this. We can debate it on the floor if the chair sends it out there. But I don't question the gentleman on the minute they go in the system, it costs the taxpayers nothing. But the minute after that and to the time when they retire, it does. It costs the system money. It costs us $250 million in an ARC last year for the whole system. It costs us $361 this year, and it'll cost us more in years to come. They weren't working in the state of Georgia, and I just have pause with allowing them to cost our taxpayers money.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On House Bill 697, I'd like to put my name by it. It's for our nonprofit clinics. Thank you.
Mr. Coomer.
Mr. Chairman, I just also encourage you and ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 190, the domestic relations update. Gives certainty to members of our, the citizens of our state when they face litigation.
Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move that we recommit House Bill 793 to Ways and Means.
Heard Mr. Harrell, to have a second? Second. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Aye, it's recommitted. Mr. Martin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 352. House Bill 352 removes from the $200 fee low-speed electric vehicles and electric-powered personal transportation vehicles. These were included when the fee was put on. These are vehicles that must have a tag but can't go more than 20 miles an hour on a flat surface for 1 mile. Many of the folks in our communities have them for personal use, but they're required to get a tag, and they're paying a $200 fee to drive to their mailbox and back and so forth. I think there's only 500 of them registered in the entire state.
Mr. Coomer.
Thank you. I have two questions. One, do you have a fiscal note?
I do not have a fiscal note, but I have information from the Department of Revenue that there's 558 registered. So if one would to multiply that by 200, it would be around $100,000.
And second, can you help us understand what kind of vehicle we're talking about? Is this a golf cart?
Yes, sir. I have a picture I'll pass up, and I can get one for the entire committee when we look for it, or we'll put it in there. These are what I would call glorified golf carts that run on electricity. They just require a tag because they get to a speed. They're not allowed to drive on highways that have a speed limit above 30 or 35 miles an hour. So it's very limited in scope.
Thank you.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name by House Bill 735, Representative Bentley's bill, and I just want to say that because today is Fort Valley State University Day here at the Capitol. So we do have some visitors here from visiting the Rules Committee from Fort Valley, and I just want to acknowledge them with your permission. Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name beside 672, and also, if I might, I'd like to add my name to House Bill 749, which would be a great help to many in my district and the state.
Minority Whip. Ms. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to put my name beside H.R. 940, Representative Kendrick's bill about the hosting of the largest startup pitch competition.
Mr. Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by HB 738 under open rule and under modified open rule by HB 666.
Okay, that's it. All right. This will be for tomorrow, Valentine's Day. And show the love. Under structured HR 158. A move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed, same sign. It's on. Under structured rule, HB 749. We've got lots of moves, so all those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structured rule, HB 302. Moving to second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed? We have an opposed. All right. All those that are for this, raise your hand. All those opposed. The ayes have it. It's on. Under modified structure, HB 800. Have a move. Do I have a second? Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified structure, HB 789. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Again, we have opposition. All those that are for this bill, raise your hand. Those opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. Under modified structure, HB 767. Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed? It's on. Under modified open, HB 740. Have a move. Do I hear a second? Have a move and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed, same sign. It's on. Under modified open, HB 190. Have a move in several seconds. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under open rule, HR 898. Have moved and second. All those in favor signify by aye. opposed, same sign. It's on. That's it.